Part 1 to 4. 2 pink lines. I stared at them so long my vision started to blur. In the bathroom of my own apartment, with my husband knocking on the door asking if I was okay, I held the answer to a question I never thought I'd have to ask myself. 2 men, 1 test, and a marriage that was already on life support. Ryan's voice came through the door again, softer this time. "Jenna, you've been in there for 20 minutes. Talk to me." I shoved the test into my makeup bag, flushed the toilet I never used, and opened the door with a smile that felt like broken glass on my face. "Just a headache," I said. "I'm fine." I wasn't fine. I hadn't been fine for months. But before I tell you about the test, about the impossible choice waiting for me on the other side of this moment, I need to take you back. Back to when I thought I knew what my life was supposed to look like. Back to the night my husband asked me a question that changed everything. My name is Jenna, and for 7 years I was the woman who had it all figured out. At least that's what people thought when they looked at me. 32 years old, corporate lawyer at one of Denver's top firms, married to a man who looked like he belonged in a magazine. Ryan was the kind of husband other women complimented you on at dinner parties. Charming, successful, always knew the right thing to say. We had the apartment downtown with the mountain views. We had the vacation photos that made people jealous. We had the life that looked perfect from every angle except the one that mattered, the inside. I didn't realize how hollow it had become until Ryan forced me to look at it. We were at our favorite restaurant, celebrating our 7th wedding anniversary, when he reached across the table, took my hand, and said the words that would unravel everything I thought I knew. "I want us to try something different. An open marriage." I remember the way the wine glass felt in my other hand, the way the restaurant noise seemed to disappear, like someone had pressed mute on the entire world. "What?" He squeezed my fingers like he was delivering good news. "I've been reading about it. Ethical non-monogamy. It doesn't mean I love you any less, Jenna. It actually means I love you enough to be honest about what I need." What he needed. I sat there trying to process those words while my anniversary dinner turned cold in front of me. What about what I needed? But I didn't ask that question. Not out loud. Because in that moment, looking at my husband's hopeful face, I felt something I'd been pushing down for years finally rise to the surface. Fear. Not fear of losing him to someone else. Fear of admitting that I'd been losing him for a long time already. That maybe we'd been losing each other. And I thought, stupidly, naively, that if I just gave him this, he'd come back to me. He'd realize what he had. He'd get this out of his system, and we'd be stronger. So I said yes. If you've ever agreed to something that terrified you just to keep someone close, you know the feeling. That mix of nausea and false hope. That voice in your head screaming that this is wrong while your mouth says, "Okay, let's try it." We sat in that restaurant for another 2 hours, talking about rules, boundaries, the framework of how we were going to dismantle our marriage while pretending we were evolving it. Always use protection. Always be honest about who we're seeing. No one we both know personally. No falling in love. Always come home at the end of the night. "This is going to bring us closer," Ryan said, his eyes bright in a way I hadn't seen in years. "I really believe that." I nodded. I smiled. I ordered another glass of wine because I needed something to drown the screaming in my chest. That night, we went home and made love for the first time in months. Ryan was more passionate than he'd been since our honeymoon, and I laid there afterward, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd just signed the death certificate of my marriage or the permission slip that would save it. But what I didn't know yet was that this night would change everything. Just not in the way either of us expected. The first few months were strange. Ryan threw himself into the lifestyle with an enthusiasm that made me uncomfortable. He downloaded apps. He went to meetups. He came home from dates looking either frustrated or energized, and I could never predict which. I watched my husband prepare for evenings with other women the same way he used to prepare for our date nights. The cologne. The careful outfit selection. The nervous energy. It should have destroyed me. But here's the thing. No one tells you about watching your spouse pursue other people. Sometimes it doesn't break your heart. Sometimes it just confirms what your heart already knew. I didn't feel jealous. I felt relieved. Relieved that he wasn't asking me to be everything anymore. Relieved that the pressure to be his perfect wife, his best friend, his passionate lover, his intellectual equal, his adventure partner, all at once, every single day, was finally lifting. Is that terrible? Looking back, I think that should have been my first clue. But I was too busy being grateful for the breathing room to notice what it meant. While Ryan chased connections he couldn't quite find, I threw myself into work. I told myself I wasn't interested in seeing anyone else, that I was only doing this for him, that I'd wait it out until he realized what he had at home. But the truth was simpler and sadder. I didn't think anyone would want me. 7 years of slowly feeling invisible in my own marriage had convinced me that whatever spark I used to have was gone. Ryan was the charming one. Ryan was the magnetic one. I was just the successful wife who worked too much and laughed too little. Why would anyone choose me? My best friend Carla found out about our arrangement 3 months in. I didn't tell her. She figured it out when she saw Ryan on a dating app. Swiped right. He matched with her before realizing who she was. The phone call that followed was one of the most humiliating conversations of my life. "You're letting him cheat on you with permission?" Her voice was sharp enough to cut. "It's not cheating, Carla," we both agreed. "You agreed to let him sleep around while you sit at home? Jenna, what the hell happened to you?" I didn't have an answer she would understand, because Carla had been married to her college sweetheart for 10 years, and they still looked at each other like teenagers. She didn't know what it felt like to share a bed with someone and feel completely alone. She didn't know that sometimes you give pieces of yourself away just to keep the structure standing. We didn't talk for 3 weeks after that call, and in those 3 weeks of silence from my best friend, something shifted inside me. I started to wonder if maybe I was the one missing out, not on other men, on myself. Let me take you back to a different time for a moment. To the woman I was before Ryan, before the corner office, before I learned to shrink myself into spaces that were never meant to fit me. I was 23 and fearless, fresh out of law school, ready to take on the world. I walked into rooms and people noticed. Not because I was beautiful, though I was told I was, but because I had this energy, this aliveness. I remember a professor once telling me, "Jenna, you have a fire in you. Don't let anyone put it out." Somewhere along the way, someone did. I don't blame Ryan entirely. I was complicit in my own dimming. I chose comfort over passion. I chose security over spark. I told myself that grown-up love was supposed to feel calm, stable, maybe even a little boring. That the electricity I felt in my 20s was just youthful naivety. But sitting alone in my beautiful apartment while my husband was out looking for something he couldn't name, I started to wonder. What if the fire wasn't gone? What if it was just waiting for oxygen? And then, on a random Tuesday night, everything changed. It was a work thing. A happy hour for a case we'd just won, at a rooftop bar downtown with views of the mountains going pink in the sunset. I almost didn't go. I'd been saying no to social events for years. Always too busy, always too tired. But something made me say yes that night. Maybe it was loneliness. Maybe it was Carla's silence echoing in my ears. Maybe it was just the universe pushing me towards something I wasn't ready to name. Whatever it was, I put on a dress I hadn't worn in 2 years and walked into that bar like I had something to prove. That's when I saw him. Marcus. He was standing by the window holding a whiskey, laughing at something a colleague was saying. I didn't know his name yet. I didn't know he was an architect who'd moved to Denver after a divorce in Chicago. I didn't know he had a daughter he saw every other weekend, or that he'd spent the last 2 years rebuilding himself from the ground up. All I knew in that moment was that when he turned and caught my eye across the room, I felt something I hadn't felt in so long I'd forgotten it was possible. I felt seen. He walked over to me. Not smoothly, not like a man running a play. He walked over like he couldn't help it. Like I was a magnet and he was just metal responding to physics. "I don't think we've met," he said. "I'm Marcus." "Jenna." And that was it. That was the whole beginning. Just two names exchanged across a crowded rooftop while the Denver sky turned gold. We talked for 3 hours. Not flirting exactly, though there was something underneath every word, something electric and terrifying. We talked about work and family and the books we'd read and the places we wanted to go. We talked about failure and reinvention and the strange grief of losing a version of yourself you thought was permanent. At some point, the happy hour ended and people started leaving, but neither of us moved. We just kept talking, like we were afraid that if we stopped, the spell would break. "Can I be honest with you?" Marcus asked, as the last of our colleagues disappeared into the elevator. "Please. I don't usually do this. Talk to someone for hours like this. I'm not..." He paused, searching for words. "I'm not looking for anything complicated, but I'd really like to see you again." This was my moment. The moment I should have said, "I'm married. I'm in an open marriage, but I'm not really participating. I'm just here because I was lonely and you happen to be kind." But what came out was different. "I'd like that too." I gave him my number. He texted me before I even got to my car. And as I drove home to the apartment I shared with my husband, I felt something crack open in my chest. Something that had been locked so long I forgot it existed. What I didn't realize was that Marcus wasn't going to be a chapter. He was becoming the whole story. Our first real date was supposed to be just dinner. A nice restaurant in Lodo, nothing too intimate, nothing that would feel like a betrayal. I told myself I was just making a friend, that this was allowed. That Ryan had been on dozens of dates by now and I was simply evening the score. But from the moment Marcus picked me up outside my office building, I knew I was lying to myself. He opened the car door for me. Such a small thing. Ryan hadn't done that in years. And when I sat down and he walked around to the driver's side, I caught myself in the side mirror, and the woman looking back at me was smiling, really smiling, not the polite smile I wore at work. Not the tired smile I gave Ryan when he came home late. This was something else, something I'd forgotten I was capable of. Dinner turned into a walk along the river. The walk turned into drinks at a quiet bar neither of us had been to before. The drinks turned into sitting on a bench in Commons Park, watching the city lights reflect on the water while Marcus told me about his divorce. "She said I worked too much," he said, not looking at me, looking at the water like it held answers. And she was right. I did. I thought I was building something for us, for our daughter. But I was really just hiding. Work was easier than being present, easier than being vulnerable. He turned to me then, and something in his eyes made my breath catch. "I don't want to hide anymore. I spent 2 years in therapy learning how to show up for my own life. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, I don't know what this is between us, but I don't want to pretend it's not happening." I should have told him the truth right then. About Ryan, about our arrangement, about the fact that I was technically allowed to be sitting on this bench with him, but emotionally had no idea what I was doing. Instead, I kissed him. It wasn't planned. It wasn't strategic. One moment we were talking about vulnerability, and the next moment his lips were on mine, and everything I thought I knew about myself collapsed into that single point of contact. I had kissed Ryan thousands of times. Comfortable kisses. Routine kisses. Kisses that said goodbye or hello or fine if you want to. This was different. This kiss had hunger in it. Not just physical hunger, though there was that too. This was the hunger of being truly met, of being seen and wanted in the same moment. When we finally pulled apart, both of us breathing hard, Marcus looked at me with a question in his eyes. "Jenna, I need to know. Is there someone else? Because the way you just kissed me, that wasn't casual." And there it was. The door I'd been avoiding. I could have lied. I could have kept the fantasy alive a little longer. But something about the way he'd been honest with me made dishonesty feel impossible. "I'm married," I said. The words hung in the air between us, ugly and true. "His name is Ryan. We've been together for 7 years. And 4 months ago, he asked if we could open our marriage." I watched Marcus's face cycle through emotions, surprise, confusion. Something that might have been disappointment. "Open," he repeated. So you're allowed to be here with me? Technically, yes, but you're the first person I couldn't finish the sentence, because what I wanted to say was too big, too terrifying to put into words. You're the first person who's made me feel anything in years. You're the first person who's looked at me like I'm not just a function, but a human being. You're the first person who's made me wonder if I'm in the wrong life entirely. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached over and took my hand. Thank you for telling me, he said. I know that wasn't easy. You're not running away? Should I be? I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Most people would. I'm not most people. He squeezed my hand. Look, I don't have everything figured out. I don't know what this means or where it goes. But I know I haven't felt like this in a very long time, and I'd rather figure it out honestly than walk away because it's complicated. That night when I got home, Ryan was already asleep. I stood in our bedroom doorway watching him breathe, this man I'd built a life with, and I felt like a stranger in my own home. I crawled into bed beside him, careful not to wake him, and stared at the ceiling until dawn. What I didn't know yet was that the heart doesn't ask permission. It just decides. And mine had already started choosing. The weeks that followed were the most alive I'd felt in years. Marcus and I saw each other twice a week, then 3 times, then whenever we could steal an hour. Coffee before work, lunch in hidden corners of the city, long walks where we talked about everything and nothing, and yes, eventually, more than walks. I won't pretend there wasn't a physical component. There was. But what surprised me was how secondary it felt compared to everything else. With Ryan, physical intimacy had become transactional, a way to maintain connection, to check a box, to reassure ourselves that we were still a functioning couple. With Marcus, it was different. It was an extension of the conversation we'd been having since that first night on the rooftop, a way of saying things words couldn't capture. I want to know you. I see you. You matter to me. Have you ever loved someone so much it scared you? That's where I found myself, 6 weeks into whatever Marcus and I were building. Terrified. Not of him, but of what he was revealing about my marriage. About myself. Every moment with Marcus threw my life with Ryan into sharper contrast. Ryan talked at me. Marcus talked with me. Ryan made plans for us. Marcus asked what I wanted. Ryan looked through me. Marcus looked at me. The comparisons were constant and devastating. And the worst part? Ryan was trying. He really was. After his string of disappointing dates, he'd started coming home earlier. He'd cook dinner. He'd ask about my day with what seemed like genuine interest. He'd stopped talking about other women and started talking about us. I think this experiment was good for us, he said one night, pouring me wine in our kitchen while something Italian simmered on the stove. It made me realize what I have. I nodded, smiled, took a sip of wine to avoid responding. Because what could I say? That while he was out there discovering he wanted me, I was out there discovering I might want someone else? The guilt was constant, a low hum underneath every happy moment with Marcus. A sharp stab every time Ryan did something thoughtful. I was betraying him, not physically. We had agreed to this. But emotionally. In every way that actually mattered. And then she said something I'll never forget. Carla finally called after weeks of silence. I was in my car outside Marcus's apartment, having just said goodbye to him, still carrying the warmth of his kiss, when her name flashed on my screen. We need to talk, she said. No hello, no how are you. Just the voice of a woman who'd made up her mind about something. We met at a coffee shop near her house, neutral territory. She was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with a cup of tea she wasn't drinking. You look different, she said, as I slid into the seat across from her. Do I? Happier, which is what scares me. I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing. Just waited. Carla was never one to hold back for long. I've been doing a lot of thinking since our last conversation, about you and Ryan, about this whole open marriage thing. And I need to say something, and I need you to actually hear me. I'm listening. She leaned forward, her eyes intense. I was wrong to judge you. I was wrong to make you feel ashamed for trying to save your marriage in whatever way made sense to you. That wasn't fair, and I'm sorry. I felt tears prick at my eyes. I hadn't realized how much her rejection had wounded me until this moment, hearing her take it back. But, she continued, and I braced myself, I also need to say this. The woman I'm looking at right now, she's not trying to save her marriage. She's already gone. The tears spilled over. I couldn't stop them. Carla, I know you, Jenna. I've known you for 15 years, and I've never seen you look like this. Not when you got into law school, not when you made partner, not even on your wedding day. She reached across the table and grabbed my hand. You're in love with someone else, aren't you? I couldn't lie. Not to her, not anymore. Yes. The word came out broken, barely a whisper. Yes, I think I am. Carla nodded slowly, like I'd just confirmed something she already knew. Then you need to figure out what you're going to do about it, because you can't keep living in two worlds. It's going to destroy you. She was right. I knew she was right. But knowing something and being brave enough to act on it are two very different things. I drove home that night with her words echoing in my head, mixing with all the other voices. Marcus saying he wanted more. Ryan saying he wanted to close the marriage. My own voice, buried so deep I could barely hear it, saying something I wasn't ready to acknowledge. And then, the very next week, Ryan said the words I'd been dreading. I think we should close the marriage. We were in the kitchen again. That kitchen where all our important conversations seemed to happen, surrounded by the evidence of the life we'd built. Expensive appliances we rarely used. Photos from vacations we'd taken to prove we were happy. A wine rack full of bottles we were saving for special occasions that never came. What? I asked, even though I'd heard him perfectly. I want to go back to how things were. Just us. He moved toward me, reaching for my hands. These past few months being with other people, it made me realize that what I was looking for was right here all along. I don't want anyone else, Jenna. I just want you. 6 months ago, these words would have been everything I wanted to hear. 6 months ago, I would have collapsed into his arms with relief and gratitude, would have told myself that the experiment worked, that we were stronger now, that everything was going to be okay. But 6 months ago, I hadn't met Marcus. Ryan, I started, but he cut me off. I know I put you through a lot. I know this wasn't what you signed up for, but we can get past it. We can go to therapy, work on us, rebuild what we had. What we had. I wanted to ask him what exactly he thought we'd had. A marriage built on my accommodation of his needs? A partnership where I was always the one bending? A love that required me to shrink so he could expand? But I didn't say any of that. Instead, I said the most honest thing I could manage in that moment. I don't know if I can. His face changed. That hopeful, earnest expression shifting into something darker. Confusion. Then suspicion. What do you mean you don't know? I mean... I pulled my hands away from his. I mean that I've changed, Ryan. These past few months, I've changed. And I'm not sure I can just go back to how things were. Changed how? The question was sharp now, accusatory. Is there someone else? Have you been seeing someone? I should have lied. Every survival instinct I had was screaming at me to lie, to buy myself more time, to figure this out before blowing everything up. But I was so tired of lying. So tired of performing the role of the wife I thought I was supposed to be. Yes, I said. There's someone. The silence that followed was louder than anything I've ever heard. Ryan stared at me like I'd just transformed into a stranger in front of his eyes. Which, in a way, I had. Who? His name is Marcus. He's an architect. I met him at a work event 2 months ago. 2 months? Ryan's voice cracked. You've been seeing someone for 2 months and you didn't tell me? You were on dates every week for 3 months and I never asked for details. That's different. How? How is it different? Because I was always coming back to you. He was shouting now, something Ryan almost never did. I was out there looking for something, yes, but it was always temporary. It was always with the understanding that you were my home, that we were building something here. And what was I supposed to be doing while you built? Just waiting? Just existing in your peripheral vision until you decided you were ready to see me again? You were supposed to fight for us. The words hit me like a physical blow. That's what I was supposed to do? Fight for a marriage where I had to compete for my own husband's attention? You asked me to let you see other women, Ryan. You asked me to share you, and I said yes because I thought it was the only way to keep you. I said yes because I was terrified that if I said no, you'd leave anyway. Do you have any idea how that felt? He was quiet now, the anger draining from his face, replaced by something that looked almost like shame. Jenna, I didn't know. Of course you didn't, because you never asked. We stood there in our beautiful kitchen, two strangers wearing the faces of people who used to love each other, and I realized that this was it. This was the moment our marriage had been building toward for years. Not the open relationship, not Marcus. This reckoning with everything we'd both been too afraid to say. Ryan took a breath. Do you love him? The question hung in the air between us. I don't know, I said. And it was the truth. I don't know what I feel anymore. About him, about you, about any of this. Then how can you? But I know that I feel something I haven't felt in a long time. And I think I owe it to myself to figure out what that means before I promise you anything. Ryan's jaw tightened. So what? You want to keep seeing him? While we're supposed to be working on us? I don't know what I want. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Well, figure it out. Because I can't do this, Jenna. I can't sit here and watch you fall in love with someone else while I wait for you to choose me. That's not fair. None of this is fair. He grabbed his keys from the counter. I'm going out. I need to think. He was almost to the door when he turned back. I never wanted to lose you. Everything I did, the open marriage, all of it, I thought it would bring us closer. I thought... His voice broke. I thought if I gave you freedom, you'd choose me anyway. I thought you'd always choose me. The door closed behind him, and I stood alone in the kitchen, surrounded by all the trappings of a life that suddenly felt like it belonged to someone else. And then, the next morning, I missed my period. Parte 3 to 4. I told myself it was stress. The fight with Ryan, the situation with Marcus, the constant emotional whiplash of living between two worlds. Of course my body was reacting. Of course things were off. I'd been late before during stressful times. This was nothing. This was just my system responding to chaos. I believed that lie for exactly 4 days. 4 days of checking my phone calendar obsessively. 4 days of doing mental math that never added up the way I wanted. 4 days of avoiding both Ryan and Marcus because I couldn't face either of them while this question mark hung over my head. On the 5th day, I bought a pregnancy test. Actually, I bought 4. Different brands, because I needed to be sure, needed redundancy, needed something to blame if the result wasn't what I wanted. I took them to the office instead of home. Couldn't risk Ryan finding the boxes, couldn't risk the conversation that would follow. So there I was, a 32-year-old partner at a prestigious law firm, locked in a bathroom stall at 7 in the morning, hands shaking as I unwrapped the first test. The instructions said to wait 3 minutes. I couldn't look for 5. And when I finally did, when I finally forced my eyes down to that little plastic window, I saw what I already knew I would see. 2 pink lines. I took the other 3 tests, all positive. 4 different brands, 4 identical results, 4 confirmations of a truth I wasn't ready to face. I sat on that bathroom floor for almost an hour. Just sat there, knees pulled to my chest, trying to make my brain work through the implications. Ryan had gotten a vasectomy 2 years ago. He'd done it because we'd decided we didn't want children. Or rather, he'd decided, and I'd agreed. The way I always agreed. The doctor had said it was effective, nearly foolproof, but nearly wasn't absolutely. There was still a chance, however small, that the vasectomy had failed, which meant the baby could be his, or it could be Marcus's. We'd been careful, mostly. There was that one night, about 6 weeks ago, when careful had felt less important than connection, when the heat of the moment had overridden common sense, when I'd told myself that one time wouldn't matter. I pressed my forehead against my knees and tried to breathe. One time always matters. Every choice has a consequence. I didn't know who the father was. I might not know for months, and I had absolutely no idea what to do with that information. What I did know was that I couldn't tell anyone. Not yet. Not until I had a plan, a path forward, something other than this paralyzing uncertainty. I cleaned myself up, threw the tests in the trash at a coffee shop 3 blocks away, and went back to work like nothing had happened. But something had happened. Everything had happened. And looking back, I should have known that secrets like this don't stay buried. They find their way to the surface whether you're ready or not. I made an appointment with my doctor for the following week, told myself I needed to confirm the results properly, get accurate timing, understand my options. But really, I was buying time. Time to think, time to feel, time to figure out how to have a conversation I couldn't even imagine. The week that followed was surreal. I went through the motions of my life like an actress hitting her marks. Meetings at work, dinners with Ryan, who was treating me with a fragile politeness that felt worse than anger, stolen phone calls with Marcus, who could tell something was wrong but didn't push. "You seem distant," he said one night when I called him from my car in the parking garage of my building. "Just work stress," I lied. "Big case." "Jenna." His voice was gentle but firm. "I know when you're deflecting. You don't have to tell me what's going on, but please don't pretend everything's fine when it isn't." I closed my eyes. "You're right. Something is going on, but I can't talk about it yet. I need to figure some things out first." "Okay." No demands. No ultimatums. Just acceptance. "I'm here when you're ready." "Marcus?" "Yeah?" "Thank you for being patient with me. I know this situation isn't easy." He laughed softly. "Nothing worth having is easy. I learned that the hard way." When I hung up, I sat in my car and cried. For him, for Ryan, for myself. For this baby that might exist inside me, already tangled up in a mess not of its making. If only I had known what was waiting for me at home. Ryan found the test before I could tell him. I'd been so careful. I'd thrown away the ones from the office, hidden the doctor's appointment in my calendar under a fake meeting name. But I'd forgotten about one thing. The test I'd taken at home the morning of my appointment, just to make sure the others weren't a fluke. I'd wrapped it in tissue and buried it at the bottom of the bathroom trash, planning to take the whole bag out when Ryan wasn't home. But Ryan got home early. And Ryan decided to be helpful. And Ryan, for the first time in 7 years of marriage, emptied the bathroom trash. I came home from my doctor's appointment to find him sitting on our bed, the positive test on the nightstand beside him, his face a mask I couldn't read. "Whose is it?" 3 words. That's all he said. Not, "Are you okay?" or "What does this mean?" or even, "Why didn't you tell me?" Just whose is it? Like the baby was already a weapon. Like ownership was the only question that mattered. "Ryan, I can explain. Whose is it?" I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, frozen. All the speeches I'd been preparing, all the gentle ways I'd imagined breaking this news, evaporated. "I don't know." The words hung in the air. Ryan stared at me like I'd spoken in a foreign language. "You don't know?" "I don't know," I repeated, and my voice cracked on the second word. "It could be yours. Vasectomies fail sometimes. The doctor said 1 in 2,000. Or it could be his." "Yes." There was no point in lying now. "Yes, it could be his." Ryan stood up slowly, like a man moving through water. He picked up the test, looked at it, then looked at me with an expression that will haunt me for the rest of my life. It wasn't anger, not exactly. It was devastation. The look of a man watching everything he thought he knew crumble into dust. "I had a vasectomy for you." His voice was quiet. Dangerously quiet. "Because you said you didn't want kids. Because you said your career was enough, and now you're pregnant with someone else's baby." "We don't know that." "Stop." He held up his hand. Just stop. Stop managing me. Stop trying to find the angle that makes this okay. There is no angle, Jenna. This is not okay. Ryan, please, I didn't plan this. I didn't want this to happen. But it did happen. Because you were out there falling in love with another man while I was here trying to save our marriage. You were out there first. I couldn't help it. The words exploded out of me. You opened this door, Ryan. You asked for this. You spent months chasing other women, and I said nothing. I supported you. I waited. And the one time I let myself feel something for someone else, suddenly, I'm the villain? You're pregnant. I know. I was screaming now, tears streaming down my face. I know I'm pregnant. You think I don't know that? You think I've been sleeping peacefully while this bomb ticks inside me? I have been terrified, Ryan. Terrified and alone and trying to figure out how to tell you something that would destroy everything we have. Everything we had, he corrected. Whatever we had, Jenna, it's already destroyed. You destroyed it the moment you let him touch you without protection. I wanted to point out the hypocrisy. I wanted to throw his own dates in his face, ask about all the women he'd been with, whether he'd been perfectly careful every single time. But what was the point? We weren't arguing about fairness anymore. We were arguing about a baby that might not even be his, a baby that had turned a complicated situation into an impossible one. Ryan grabbed his jacket from the chair. Where are you going? I don't know. Out. Away from here. He stopped at the bedroom door but didn't turn around. I need to think, and I can't think while I'm looking at you. The door closed behind him, then the front door, then the sound of his car starting, pulling away, disappearing into the night. I stood in our bedroom alone, one hand pressed against my stomach where something new was growing, and I felt the last threads of my marriage unraveling around me. This was the moment I realized the truth. He opened the door, looking for adventure. I walked through it, looking for air. The same door led us to completely different places. And now, standing in the wreckage, I had no idea how to find my way back. The next 3 days were the longest of my life. Ryan didn't come home. He didn't call. He responded to my texts with single words. Fine. Busy. Later. I called in sick to work, something I never did. I couldn't focus, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but lie on the couch and stare at the ceiling, replaying every moment that had led me here. I called Marcus on the second day. I need to tell you something. I could hear the concern in his pause. What's wrong? I'm pregnant. Silence. Longer than the silence from Ryan, if that was possible. And I don't know if it's yours or Ryan's. Ryan had a vasectomy, but they can fail. We'd need a test to know for sure, and the safe ones can't be done until later in the pregnancy, and... Jenna... His voice cut through my rambling. Slow down. Breathe. I breathed. Okay, he said. I'm going to ask you a question, and I need you to answer honestly. Can you do that? Yes. What do you want? I started to answer, then stopped. Because I realized I didn't know. I had spent so many years wanting what Ryan wanted, what my career demanded, what society expected, that I'd forgotten how to access my own desires. I don't know, I admitted. I don't know what I want. Then let me tell you what I want, and you can see if any of it resonates. He took a breath. I want to be with you. Not because of the baby, not because of the situation, but because these past 2 months have been the most real thing I've felt in years. If that baby is mine, I'll be the best father I can possibly be. If it's Ryan's, I'll step back and let you figure out your marriage. But either way, I'm not going anywhere unless you ask me to. I was crying again. I seem to do a lot of that lately. How can you be so calm about this? I'm not calm, he laughed, but there was no humor in it. I'm terrified, but I've been through a divorce. I've lost a marriage. I've rebuilt from nothing. And if there's one thing I learned from all of that, it's that running from hard things only makes them harder. So I'm staying. I'm staying, and I'm feeling all of it, and I'm trusting that we'll figure it out together. I want you to understand something about that moment. For 7 years, I had been married to a man who made decisions about our life and expected me to follow, who opened our marriage without considering how I might feel, who wanted to close it when it suited him and was devastated when I couldn't comply on command. And here was Marcus, in the middle of the most complicated situation imaginable, asking me what I wanted and telling me he'd support whatever I decided. It wasn't even a choice. It was clarity. "I want to have this baby," I said, and the words surprised me as much as they surprised him. "I don't know whose it is. I don't know how any of this is going to work. But I want it. And I want to find out who I am as a mother, separate from who I've been as a wife. Then that's what we'll do. Marcus, I'm not saying I'm choosing you over Ryan. I'm not saying I know what happens next. I'm just saying, I know." I could hear the smile in his voice. "You're saying you're choosing yourself. And that's the most important choice you could make right now." When we hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt in months, maybe years. Peace. Not because anything was resolved. Everything was still chaos. But because for the first time, I was making decisions based on what I wanted, instead of what I was afraid to lose. And that night, when I finally fell asleep on the couch I'd been haunting for days, I dreamed of the woman I used to be. The fearless one. The one with fire. She was still in there, I realized. She'd just been waiting for oxygen. Ryan came back on the 4th day. I heard his key in the lock at noon and sat up on the couch where I'd been dozing, suddenly aware of how terrible I must look. Unwashed hair, Ryan's old sweatshirt, the physical evidence of days spent falling apart. He stood in the entryway, looking at me, and I saw something in his face that I didn't expect. Exhaustion. Not just physical, though there was that. Emotional exhaustion. The look of a man who had fought every battle inside himself and was finally surrendering to something. "I've been thinking," he said, not moving from the doorway. "I know. I've been thinking about us, about everything, about how we got here." He finally moved, crossing to the armchair across from the couch. He didn't sit next to me, I noticed that. And I've realized something I probably should have admitted a long time ago. I waited, afraid to speak, afraid to break whatever spell had brought him back. I asked for the open marriage because I was unhappy. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my chest ache. But I wasn't unhappy with you. I was unhappy with myself, with the life I thought I was supposed to want. I thought if I could just experience more, feel more, be more, I'd figure out what was missing. And did you? He laughed, but it was hollow. Yeah. I figured out that what was missing was me. I was so busy chasing something out there that I stopped showing up here. I stopped seeing you. And by the time I realized what I had, you'd already started looking elsewhere. Ryan, let me finish. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes fixed on the floor. I'm not saying this to make you feel guilty. I'm saying it because I need you to understand. I opened the door. I pushed you through it. And I don't get to be angry that you found something on the other side. He looked up at me then, and his eyes were wet. I want to be angry. I want to blame you. It would be so much easier if this was your fault. But it's not. It's ours. It's both of us, failing to say what we needed until it was too late. My throat was tight. What are you saying? I'm saying I want the divorce. The word hit me like a physical blow, even though I'd been expecting it. Even though part of me had been hoping for it. If that baby is mine, he continued, I'll be involved. I'll be a father. I won't punish a child for our mistakes. But I can't stay married to you, Jenna. Not knowing that you love someone else. Not knowing that I lost you before I even realized you were leaving. I wanted to argue. I wanted to fight. I wanted to tell him that we could still fix this, that love could be rebuilt, that 7 years had to count for something. But when I opened my mouth, different words came out. I understand. He blinked, clearly expecting resistance. You do? Yes? I pulled my knees up to my chest, feeling smaller than I had in years. I don't want to fight anymore, Ryan. I'm tired of fighting for something that's been broken for so long. And I think maybe we've both known it was broken. We just didn't want to admit it. So what now? Now we figure out the logistics, the apartment, the lawyers. I put a hand on my stomach. The baby. Have you decided what you're going to do? About finding out whose it is? I'm going to wait. There's a test they can do during pregnancy, but it's invasive. I'd rather wait until after. And until then? Until then, I'm going to focus on being healthy, on figuring out who I am, on building a life I actually want instead of a life I fell into. Ryan nodded slowly. And Marcus? Where does he fit into this life you're building? I thought about how to answer. I don't know yet. He wants to be part of it, but I've spent 7 years defining myself by my relationship to you. I'm not going to jump into defining myself by my relationship to him. I need to figure out who I am alone first. For the first time in days, something like respect flickered across Ryan's face. That's probably the healthiest thing you've said in this whole conversation. Therapy. I managed a weak smile. I started last week. Good. He stood up, and for a moment I thought he was going to leave again. But instead, he crossed to the couch and sat down beside me. Close, but not touching. I'm sorry, he said softly. For all of it. For the open marriage. For not seeing you. For making you feel like you had to say yes to things you didn't want just to keep me. I'm sorry, too. I turned to face him. For not telling you how I felt. For letting it build up until it exploded. For not being brave enough to ask for what I needed until I found it somewhere else. We sat there for a long moment, two people at the end of something, acknowledging the wreckage with something approaching grace. I did love you, Ryan said finally. I know it might not have felt like it, but I did. I loved you too. I reached over and took his hand. I think maybe that's why it hurts so much, because we weren't wrong to try, we just grew in different directions, toward different doors. Yeah. I squeezed his fingers. Toward different doors. He squeezed back, then let go. I'm going to stay with my brother for a while, until we figure out the living situation. But I'll call. And if you need anything, for the pregnancy or whatever, I'm here. That doesn't change just because we do. Thank you, Ryan. He stood up, grabbed a bag I hadn't noticed he'd brought, and walked to the door. But before he opened it, he turned back one more time. For what it's worth, I hope the baby is his. I stared at him, stunned. What? Because if it's mine, we'll be connected forever. Co-parenting, holidays, all of it. And I think we both deserve a clean break. He gave me a sad smile. I think you deserve a chance to build something new, without me getting in the way. He left. And I sat on that couch, hand on my stomach, tears streaming down my face, mourning a marriage that had died long before either of us was brave enough to bury it. The weeks after Ryan left were strange. Not bad, exactly, just unfamiliar. Like moving through a house where all the furniture had been rearranged in the dark. I kept reaching for things that weren't there anymore. His coffee cup in the morning, his side of the bed at night, the sound of his key in the lock, which had once filled me with complicated feelings and now just filled me with silence. I stayed in the apartment because neither of us could face dealing with the real estate situation yet. We'd bought the place together 5 years ago, back when we still believed in forever. Now it was just another thing to divide, another asset to argue over, another reminder that love stories don't always end the way you think they will. But even surrounded by the ghosts of my marriage, something unexpected started to happen. I started to find myself. It began with small things. Eating breakfast when I wanted, not when Ryan's schedule demanded. Watching the shows he'd always complained about. Playing music he hated while I cleaned. Tiny rebellions that reminded me I was still a person with preferences, with desires, with a life that existed outside of anyone else's expectations. I started seeing my therapist twice a week. Dr. Yai, Chen was a small woman with sharp eyes and a gentle voice, and she had a way of asking questions that cracked me open like an egg. "Tell me about the woman you were before Ryan," she said in our third session. "I don't know if I remember her." "Try." So I tried. I told her about law school, about the fire my professor had seen in me. I told her about the dreams I'd had, the cases I wanted to fight, the person I thought I'd become. And then I told her about how those dreams had slowly shifted, reshaped themselves to fit inside a marriage that demanded compromise. How I'd stopped fighting for things because fighting caused conflict. How I'd learned to want what Ryan wanted because it was easier than wanting something different. "And now?" Dr. Chen asked. "Now what do you want?" I put my hand on my stomach, which was just starting to show if you knew where to look. "I want to be someone my child can be proud of. I want to make decisions because they're right for me, not because I'm afraid of being alone. I want to stop apologizing for taking up space." That sounds like a beginning. It feels like an ending. She smiled, that knowing smile therapists have. Sometimes they're the same thing. I thought about that a lot in the days that followed, beginnings and endings, doors closing and opening, the same action looking completely different depending on which side you were standing on. Marcus was patient. More patient than I deserved, probably. He didn't push for answers I couldn't give. He didn't demand to know where he stood. He just showed up, consistently, quietly, in all the ways that mattered. He brought me ginger tea when the morning sickness hit. He sat with me through doctor's appointments, holding my hand while the ultrasound technician pointed out features I couldn't quite make sense of. He listened when I needed to talk and stayed quiet when I needed silence. And slowly, I started to let him in. Not all the way. Not yet. I was still too raw, too uncertain, too aware that I'd spent 7 years losing myself in someone else's orbit. I wasn't going to make that mistake again, but I let him close enough to matter, close enough to hurt, close enough that when he looked at me with those steady eyes and said, "I'm not going anywhere," I almost believed him. "How do you know?" I asked one night. We were on my couch, the apartment quiet around us, the city lights glittering through windows that no longer felt like they belonged to my old life. "How do you know you want to stay? You could be signing up for someone else's baby, for someone else's mess, for a woman who doesn't even know who she is anymore." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached over and took my hand. "Can I tell you something I've never told anyone?" "Yes." When my marriage ended, I thought I was done. I thought, okay, this is it. I had my chance at love and I blew it. I'll just be a good dad and a decent architect and that'll be enough. He traced circles on my palm with his thumb. And for 2 years it was enough. Or I told myself it was. I went to therapy. I did the work. I rebuilt myself from the foundation up. And I thought I was healed. You weren't? I was functional. That's not the same thing. He looked at me, and in the low light, his eyes were impossibly soft. Then I met you, and something woke up. Something I thought was dead. And I realized that I hadn't healed. Not really. I'd just gotten very good at not wanting things. I knew that feeling. God, I knew that feeling. So how do I know I want to stay? He lifted my hand to his lips and kissed my knuckles. Because being with you, even when it's hard, even when it's complicated, even when I have no idea what's going to happen next, is better than the alternative. The alternative is going back to sleep. And I don't want to be asleep anymore, Jenna. I want to be awake. I want to feel everything, even when it hurts. I started to cry, which seemed to be my default state these days. But for once, the tears weren't from grief or fear or confusion. They were from something else. Something that felt suspiciously like hope. "I can't promise you anything," I said through the tears. "I don't know what's going to happen with the baby. I don't know what's going to happen with me. I'm still figuring out who I am and what I want, and I know." He pulled me close and I let him. "I'm not asking for promises. I'm asking for a chance. Just a chance to figure it out together." I buried my face in his shoulder and breathed him in. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay, let's figure it out together." The divorce papers came 6 weeks later. Ryan had been true to his word. Clean, fair, no fighting over things that didn't matter. He let me keep the apartment. I let him keep the investment accounts. We split everything else down the middle like two business partners dissolving a corporation, which in some ways was exactly what we were. I signed the papers at Dr. Chen's office, which felt fitting somehow. She didn't say anything while I put my name on line after line, just sat there being present, holding space for whatever I needed to feel. When it was done, I looked up at her. "It's strange. I thought I'd feel sadder." "What do you feel?" I considered the question. Relief and grief. But not the grief I expected. I'm not mourning Ryan. I'm mourning the version of myself who thought that marriage was the whole story. The version who was so afraid of being alone that she stayed in a relationship that was slowly killing her. And what about the version of you sitting here now? I put my hand on my stomach, now undeniably round at 20 weeks. Inside, the baby kicked, a sensation I was still getting used to. A reminder that no matter what happened, I wasn't alone anymore. This version is terrified, I admitted. But she's also more awake than she's been in years. She's making choices. Real choices. Even when they're hard. Dr. Chen smiled. That sounds like growth. It feels like burning. Sometimes they're the same thing too. What would you do in my place? I've asked myself that question 1,000 times over the past months. If you'd told me a year ago that I'd be sitting here, divorced, pregnant with a baby whose father I don't know, falling in love with a man I met at a happy hour while my marriage was technically open, I would have said you were describing someone else's life. Someone braver than me. Someone more reckless. Someone who didn't play by the rules. But here's what I've learned. Playing by the rules doesn't protect you. I played by every rule for 7 years. I was the good wife. I compromised. I accommodated. I bent myself into shapes that weren't natural, so I could fit into spaces that weren't meant for me. And where did it get me? To a husband who loved me but couldn't see me. To a life that looked perfect from the outside and felt empty from the inside. To a version of myself so diminished that I barely recognized her in the mirror. The rules didn't save me. Breaking them did. I'm not saying I did everything right. God knows I made mistakes. I should have told Marcus about my marriage sooner. I should have been more careful about protection. I should have had the courage to tell Ryan how unhappy I was before he had to open the door himself. But I can't change any of that now. All I can do is move forward. All I can do is make better choices from here. The baby came on a Tuesday in March. After 18 hours of labor that felt like 18 years, after pain I didn't know my body was capable of feeling, after a final push that seemed to rip me in half, she arrived. A girl. 7 pounds, 4 ounces. A full head of dark hair and a cry that shattered something inside me and put it back together in a different shape. Marcus was there. He'd held my hand through all of it, steady and present, and exactly where he'd promised to be. And when the nurse placed her on my chest, when I felt the weight of her for the first time, I looked up at him and saw tears streaming down his face. "She's beautiful," he whispered. "She's perfect." I looked down at my daughter, this tiny person who had grown inside me through the strangest, hardest, most transformative months of my life. She had dark hair. She had my nose. She had features that could belong to either man or neither, or just to herself. "Do you want to know?" I asked Marcus. "About the paternity?" "We can do the test now. We can know for sure." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached down and stroked the baby's cheek with one finger, so gentle it broke my heart. "I already know everything I need to know," he said. "She's yours. And I'm going to love her regardless. If she's mine biologically, that's a gift. If she's not, I'll still be here. Because I'm not here for DNA, Jenna. I'm here for you." I cried then. exhausted, hormonal, overwhelmed tears that soaked into my hospital gown. But underneath the tears was something else. Gratitude. For Marcus. For myself. For the courage I'd found to walk away from a life that wasn't serving me and toward one that might. The nurse asked me what I wanted to name her. I looked at my daughter, at this brand new person who was just beginning her story, and a name came to me. Not one I'd planned, not one from any list, just something that felt right. Aurora, I said, like the dawn. Marcus smiled. A new beginning. Yeah. I kissed my daughter's forehead, breathing in her newborn scent, feeling the weight of her settle into my arms like she'd always belonged there. A new beginning. I want to tell you that everything was easy after that. That Marcus and I walked off into the sunset, that Ryan faded gracefully into the background, that my life became the fairy tale I'd always secretly wanted. But life isn't a fairy tale. And the truth is messier than that. Ryan did a paternity test. He wanted to know, even if Marcus didn't care. The results came back 2 weeks after Aurora was born, while I was still learning how to breastfeed, and Marcus was still learning how to change diapers, and all of us were still adjusting to the new reality of our lives. The baby was Marcus's. When I called Ryan to tell him, the line was silent for a long time. "Are you okay?" I asked, not sure what answer I was hoping for. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Part of me is relieved. This makes things cleaner. But part of me..." He trailed off. "Part of you what?" "Part of me is grieving something that was never even real. The possibility of being a father. The chance to have one more connection to you." My throat tightened. "Ryan..." "Don't," he said gently. "Don't apologize. This is just how it is. And I need to feel it for a while. But I'll be okay. Eventually." We hung up with promises to stay in touch, though we both knew we probably wouldn't. Some connections aren't meant to last forever. Some people come into your life to teach you something, and when the lesson is over, they leave. Ryan taught me that I was capable of losing myself, but he also taught me that I was capable of finding myself again. And for that, despite everything, I was grateful. Marcus and I took it slow. Slower than either of us probably wanted, but I was determined to do it right this time. I wasn't going to rush into another relationship just because I was scared of being alone. I wasn't going to disappear into someone else's story when I was just learning to write my own. We moved in together when Aurora was 6 months old. Not because it was expected, but because it felt right. Because waking up next to him had started to feel like home. Because watching him with our daughter, patient and present and endlessly loving, made me believe that maybe I hadn't ruined everything after all. Maybe I'd just burned down what needed burning so something new could grow. My therapist called it a phoenix narrative. I just called it survival. It's been a year now since that night in the bathroom with the pregnancy test. A year since I stared at 2 pink lines and felt my entire life split in half. I'm sitting in the living room of the apartment I used to share with Ryan, which I now share with Marcus and Aurora. She's sleeping in her crib finally, after an hour of rocking and singing and promising her that the world is safe. Marcus is next to me on the couch reading something on his tablet while I write this. Every now and then he reaches over and squeezes my hand, just to remind me he's there. And I think about the woman I was a year ago. The woman who said yes to things that terrified her because she was afraid to say no. The woman who dimmed her own light so someone else could shine brighter. The woman who was so lost in her own life that she needed someone else to open a door before she could walk through it. That woman is gone now. Or maybe not gone. Maybe she's still in here somewhere, part of the foundation I rebuilt on. But she's not running the show anymore. The woman running the show now is someone different. Someone who makes choices because they're right for her, not because she's afraid of being alone. Someone who knows that love isn't supposed to make you smaller. Someone who finally understands that the same door can lead 2 people to completely different places, and that's not a tragedy. That's just life. Every choice has a consequence. Ryan chose to open the door. I chose to walk through it. Neither of us expected where it would lead, but maybe that's the point. You don't get to control what freedom brings. You only get to decide what to do when it arrives. I chose myself. I chose my daughter. I chose a man who sees me, really sees me, and loves what he sees. And for the first time in longer than I can remember, I'm not afraid of what comes next. I'm excited for it. If this story made you think about your own relationship, leave a comment. Tell me what you would have done. Would you have taken the same chances? Made the same choices? I'm not saying my path was the right one. There probably isn't a right path, just different paths leading to different versions of ourselves. But I know this. A year ago, I was surviving. Today, I'm living. And the difference between those two things is everything. If you're still here, if you stayed until the end of my story, thank you. Thank you for witnessing this. For holding space for all the messy, complicated, impossible parts of love and growth and starting over. If you want more stories like this, subscribe. This channel is for people who understand that love isn't simple, that relationships aren't black and white, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk through a door without knowing what's on the other side. I walked through mine, and on the other side, I found something I didn't expect. I found myself. And honestly, she was worth finding. This is a work of fiction created for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to actual events or use of public names is purely narrative and does not represent real events. We respect all lifestyles and relationship choices portrayed in this story.